The confrontation is set, the enraged Algrren against the determined Lisa and Simon. Lisa relies on a legendary artifact lent to her by Ophelia, the Night Veil, which grants powerful stealth magic at the cost of mana. A flashback reveals that 3 days ago, Lisa was examining the cloth. She realized it turns the user invisible when filled with mana. An idea suddenly struck her. She decided to test its power by sneaking up on Alfred while he was reading. Believing herself to be completely invisible, Lisa playfully waved in front of Alfred. She smiled brightly, trying to get a reaction. She even made a funny face, confident he couldn't see her. However, he remained unfazed and calmly asked her what she was doing. Completely flustered, Lisa demanded to know why he didn't say anything if he could see her the whole time. Alfred explained with a smirk that he played along because he thought it might be amusing, and he was right. Lisa realized with dismay that someone as powerful as Al could easily see through the veil's magic. Returning to the present, Lisa reflects that the veil worked perfectly on Algrren. She resolves to act as Mr. Simon's shield and help him get close enough to strike. However, Algrren furiously tells the foolish child not to get ahead of herself and unleashes an attack. Algrren screams at them not to think for a moment that they have already won. In response, Lisa quickly casts a greater Efreet shield. She braces for the impact. She holds her ground with the conviction that she can withstand it. Lisa believes that if this is all he has, she can move forward while defending. Seeing he's being pushed back, Algrren reluctantly shouts for his assistant, Robard. To Simon's surprise, a sorcerer on a spectral horse appears on the bridge. Algrren laughs, boasting that his side is also capable of stealth magic. Robard explains that it is his policy to keep his trump card hidden until the last moment. He then unleashes a powerful 7th-tier spell, Shadow Blitz. The spell collides with Lisa's barrier with explosive force. She strains, realizing she can just barely block the attack. She notes that the strength and speed of Robard's magic are on a completely different level compared to Algren's. Annoyed, Robard orders the brat to drop dead already. Algrren gloats about the power of the first-rate sorcerer from the magic guild that Isabella entrusted to him as a guard. He taunts Lisa, questioning if a mere student truly believed she stood a chance against a great noble like him. As Robard prepares another spell, Lisa grits her teeth. Suddenly, a new figure appears from behind Robard, warning him that he's about to die. It's Thylos, who has combined the Night Veil's capabilities with his own stealth magic to become completely undetectable. Alfred's plan comes to light. He knew that with this combined stealth, fewer than 10% of the guild's mages could detect the user. He was also certain that Isabella would never assign such a valuable and skilled person to guard a simple pawn. In one fluid motion, Thylos strikes, catching Robard completely off guard and slicing through him before he can react. With Robard defeated, Thylos can't help but feel awestruck, remarking that Master Alfred is truly unfathomable for devising a plan where everything worked out perfectly. Algrren can only stare in disbelief at the sudden turn of events. Algrren lets out a scream of pure shock as Lisa and Simon close in. Responding to his earlier taunt, Lisa declares with a fierce grin that of course she believed a student like her could defeat him. Their confidence stemmed from Alfred, who had assured them that with their formation, victory against Algrren was guaranteed. Now, with his bodyguard gone, Simon steps forward to confront the defenseless noble. With his blade at Algrren Belial's throat, Simon informs him that he will be arrested for his unjust acts of mass extermination. He declares that he will be handed over to the Royal Knights of the Guard. A terrified Algrren begs Simon to listen, desperately offering money and land in exchange for his freedom. Algrren frantically tries to bribe the students as well. Simon orders him to be silent. He thinks to himself that a precious life is something that can never be bought with money. In complete denial, Algrren insists this is unacceptable, raving that he was destined to claim an executive seat at the Magic Guild. His protests turn into a desperate scream as he is finally silenced. The masked mage corners Isabella, demanding her surrender while noting that her punishment will remain severe regardless. Surprisingly calm, Isabella remarks on the impressive foresight of her enemy, acknowledging that even she didn't anticipate the summoning of the mighty Deathblaze. Realizing she is out of options, Isabella flashes a sinister smile and declares she has no choice but to use her final resort. Her subordinates watch in confusion and dread. The masked mage questions what possible countermeasure she could have left. With a manic grin, Isabella warns her enemies to pay close attention, promising to terrify them with her next move. Before she can unleash her supposed trump card, Isabella is brutally and instantly cleaved in half, her lifeless body tumbling to the ground. Her subordinates scream in horror at the sudden demise of their leader. The masked mage stands bewildered, unsure of what just transpired. Isabella's dying thoughts are consumed by sheer disbelief at her impossible defeat. The masked mage quickly regains her composure, coldly informing the remaining subordinates that their end has arrived. She tells them they will soon join their fallen leader. The remaining subordinates scream in terror, their desperate pleas for mercy ignored. Elsewhere, Thylos and the rest of the squad catch their breath amidst the ruins of the Belial forces' campsite. Exhausted but triumphant, they celebrate their complete victory and the successful defense of Valnora's. The men cheer, confirming that Isabella's forces have been entirely wiped out. The soldiers joyfully embrace, attributing their miraculous survival and success to the brilliant strategies of Master Alfred and Commander Deathblaze. Eager to share the good news, they prepare to head back and report their triumph. Meanwhile, in a quiet clearing far from the battlefield, the fabric of space tiers open. An interdimensional storage portal materializes. The sharp click of heels stepping onto the grass breaks the silence. The true mastermind, Ophelia, steps forward, looking identical to the fallen Isabella. She chuckles darkly, musing over how her loyal sisters died believing they were protecting her, when in truth they had sacrificed themselves for a mere body double. Ophelia reflects on her double's final, boastful words, amused that the pawn believed herself to be the real Isabella until the very end. Despite the successful deception, Ophelia's amusement quickly turns to boiling rage as she directs her fury toward her enemies. Swearing to exact a brutally painful revenge, Ophelia laments being forced to waste her carefully prepared emergency escape magic. Her furious monologue is suddenly cut short when she senses someone else's presence nearby. Turning around, Ophelia spots Alfred standing calmly in the clearing. She recognizes him as the Belial boy involved in a family conflict, recalling that he was indeed supposed to be in this area. Dismissing him as just an unlucky student, Ophelia casually manifests deadly magical blades. She informs Alfred that despite having no personal grudge against him, his rotten luck means he has to die. Ophelia launches her projectiles, but her confidence shatters into shock as Alfred effortlessly blocks the blades with just his fingers. Unfazed, he coldly points out that she made two glaring tactical mistakes. He explains her first error was failing to properly observe her opponent's mana simply because they appeared unremarkable. Alfred continues his lecture, explaining that her second mistake was the predictable placement of her time-consuming escape magic. He notes that making her location known defeats the entire purpose of hiding. Ophelia listens in growing confusion and dread, wondering why a mere kid is lecturing her about ample battle preparations. As Alfred reiterates the importance of observing mana, Ophelia's mind races. The familiar, condescending tone triggers a horrifying realization. Feeling the sheer, overwhelming quality of his magical refinement, she realizes with mounting terror that this is no ordinary student. Trembling as she beholds his incredibly elegant and beautiful mana, Ophelia desperately begs for her realization to be false. Alfred simply smiles, asking if she has truly forgotten his magical signature. Frozen in absolute fear, Ophelia finally pieces it all together, screaming the true identity of the boy in front of her. She realizes she is facing Cedric, the legendary commander-in-chief of the Magic Guild. Isabella stares in horror, finally understanding that the boy before her is Cedric, the commander-in-chief of the Magic Guild. She recalls Ammon's warning that even as a group, they would stand no chance against him. With a calm, menacing air, Cedric asks if she finally understands who he is now. He declares it's time for him to return what she and the other sages did to him. A chilling smile spreads across Cedric's face as he tells her to prepare for retribution from a dead man. Isabella shudders, overcome with pure terror. She drops to her knees and begins to beg for forgiveness. Her plea is cut short before she can even finish his name. A powerful Longinus bullet spell slams into her, throwing her backward. Gasping for breath, she realizes he isn't even giving her a chance to surrender. She understands she must fight back or die, but Cedric simply vanishes with a faint smile. Isabella looks around in a panic, wondering where he disappeared to. Cedric's voice echoes around her, reminding her of how she and her allies paralyzed and killed him, stating it's only right to return the favor. Frantically searching, Isabella knows she will be pulverized if she doesn't find him soon. Refusing to die, she resolves to use her own powerful magic. She casts a powerful defensive spell, the divine protector of the palace, enveloping herself in a barrier of dark energy. Cedric suddenly appears before her mid-swing, questioning her intent to survive through defense alone. He dismisses her strategy as a foolish plan. He points out the futility of defending when her only real option is to kill him. Cedric reminds her that she succeeded in doing just that 2 years ago. The attack shatters her barrier, and she can only shudder in fear. Wounded and bleeding, Isabella reflects on the absurdity of his casual power, especially when she has only recovered half of her own strength. She recalls her mission to kill the great sage, a task that now seems impossible on her own. Gritting her teeth in desperation, she lets out a furious roar. Gathering all her remaining power, Isabella unleashes her ultimate attack, the 9th-tier magic Witch's Stone Spears. Isabella is shocked that even her ultimate attack couldn't have hit him. High above the destruction, Cedric balances effortlessly on a spear, criticizing her for wasting her mana on a blind, wide-area attack. Finally broken, Isabella screams in her mind that it's impossible to kill him on her own. The fear of death consumes her completely. Cedric appears before her once more, acknowledging her will to live and telling her to answer his question. He coldly asks how many lives she has unfairly claimed for her sick hobby. He wants her to understand the pain and sadness of the people she toyed with. He asks if she feels any repentance for her actions. Defeated, Isabella believes this is the end. She scoffs at the idea of repentance. Screaming that she doesn't repent, Isabella declares that he has left her no choice but to use her last resort and activates forbidden magic, Sage's absolute time. Cedric is frozen in place as the time-stop magic takes effect. Isabella knows the magic stops time for 10 seconds and believes she cannot afford to die fighting this monster. She turns to flee, determined to escape no matter what. She sprints away, confident she can get 3 mountains away in the 10 seconds she has. Her escape is cut short when she sees Cedric floating calmly in the air, completely unaffected. Cedric looks down at her with a knowing, chilling expression. Isabella stammers in utter disbelief, unable to comprehend how he is moving. With a cruel grin, Cedric asks if she was truly unaware of the nature of the imperfect spell she just cast. He roars that the imperfect spell she used is one that he himself has already perfected, driving his fist deep into her stomach. The impact cripples Isabella, leaving her gasping and twitching on the ground. Cedric stands over her, stating his revenge is complete and explaining he has paralyzed her by precisely damaging her magical circuits. Cedric reflects that her lack of repentance has made it obvious he should not be the one to end her life. He states that justice must come for the countless souls she ruthlessly claimed in pursuit of her twisted obsession. All Isabella can do is weakly beg for mercy. With a grim and determined expression, Cedric declares that the time has come. He reaches down, telling her it is time to see the light and face the consequences of her actions. In a desolate, spike-filled wasteland, Cedric stands over the defeated Isabella, declaring that the time has come for her to see the light. Wheezing and broken, she begs Sir Cedric for mercy. She desperately swears to devote her entire being to his service, promising to do everything he desires. Isabella's pleas turn to frantic screams, begging him not to kill her. Cedric listens to her cries in silence. He recalls someone else who pleaded for their life, revealing that person is now suffering at the roots of a shadow flora. Cedric explains that the person is being fed 1,500 years worth of nightmares. Isabella screams in horror at the thought. However, Cedric clarifies that he won't be feeding her to the shadow flora. With a furious expression, he roars that her own life will be what brings her ruin. A dimensional door opens behind Isabella. From the portal, the ghostly forms of young women emerge with eerie laughter. Cedric explains he has summoned the souls of her victims who are weighed down by their grudges and unable to move on. The vengeful spirits swarm Isabella, grabbing her and beginning to pull her into the portal as she begs them to stop. Cedric watches, explaining that they have been patiently waiting in despair for this chance. Cedric explains they need to repay their perpetrator to cleanse their regrets and finally pass on. Dragged into the darkness, Isabella screams for them to let her go. Isabella crashes onto a cold, hard floor. Dazed, she looks around in horror. She realizes she has been transported to her own dungeon. The spirits surround her, one of them menacingly picking up a large saw. The spirits close in, their voices echoing that now they can finally be together with her. Isabella weakly protests as they bind her. One of the spirits tells her they're going to have fun, just like when she played with them, but this time will be different. With a chilling smile, the spirit declares that this time, it's their turn to play with her. Isabella can only let out a final, terrified scream for them to stop. Isabella's screams fade from within the portal. Cedric watches calmly as the dimensional door slams shut, sealing her fate. Cedric's expression is grim and resolved. The scene shifts to the Imperial city. The focus is on the imposing structure of the Atornius Penitentiary. A man is led through the prison, reeling from the shock of receiving a life sentence. He curses Theodore and the royal knights for what they've done to him. He vows that as a great noble he will escape. He silently promises to use his connections to get out and have his revenge on the man he calls Algrren Belial. He grinds his teeth, swearing that Algrren Belial will rue the day. A voice calls out from above, casually greeting the new face. Algrren whirls around, demanding to know who dares to speak to him with such a crass attitude. A blonde inmate casually puts an arm around him, acknowledging Algrren by his full name. Algrren furiously shoves him away, telling him not to touch him so casually. The blonde prisoner says he understands, as he went through a similar phase when he first arrived. He cheerfully recounts how getting beaten daily corrected his personality over time. Algrren shudders, calling it nonsense. The blonde prisoner explains that he's in charge of teaching the newbies. He delivers the first lesson: in this dump, status means nothing to anyone. Two large inmates approach, and the blonde prisoner explains that they are the kings of the cell and their word is law. He continues that as the lowest caste, they must serve the king's every desire. He likens Algren's new role to that of a maid, with himself as the head maid in charge of training. Algrren thinks they're all insane and protests, asking if they know who he is. The blonde inmate's friendly demeanor vanishes as he sneers that of course he knows who Algrren is. He furiously reveals that Algren's bastard son ruined his entire life. He's been waiting for a newbie to take his frustrations out on, and can't believe the chances of this happening. He lunges forward, punching Algrren hard in the face. He roars that the new inmate just happens to be Alfred's father. Algrren tries to tell him to stop. He cries out in pain from another hard blow to the gut. The blonde inmate declares that from this day forward, things are settled. With a manic grin, he looms over the beaten nobleman, vowing to work him to the bone as his new maid. Algrren thinks to himself that this is insanity and cannot be real. He screams in denial, unable to comprehend how this could be happening to him. In a grand dining hall, two men discuss recent events. Ezekiel laughs maniacally, pleased to hear that Isabella has been killed. His companion Ammon remarks on his good mood, considering one of their own has just died. Ammon addresses the old man by name. Ezekiel scoffs, admitting he was never fond of the woman, who wasted her time on repulsive hobbies instead of pursuing magic. Ammon recalls that Ophelia and her dragon people were said to have dispatched her, a fact Ezekiel confirms, stating it is not surprising Isabella perished against such a foe. With a snap, Ezekiel grins, declaring that with Isabella gone, the pool of candidates for commander-in-chief has shrunk to a race between the two of them. Ammon quietly agrees, his eye twitching slightly. Noticing his companion's untouched plate, Ezekiel asks what the matter is, boasting that he served only the finest ingredients. Ammon declines the meal, stating that the ingredients do not align with his palate. Ezekiel reveals the dish is called fetal stew, made from real human meat. Horrified, Ammon realizes this is part of the taboo ritual, the forbidden art of rejuvenation. Ezekiel explains that consuming the flesh of a fetus processed through the ritual extends his lifespan by 24 hours, which will grant him another 40 years. Ammon calculates this would require 15,000 human fetuses and asks how he is procuring the ingredients. He voices his hope that Ezekiel is not sourcing them from the sacrificial herds prepared for the monster kind. Ezekiel just laughs, assuring him they are none the wiser. Ammon wonders aloud what drives Ezekiel to cling to life so tightly that he would engage in such a ritual. Ezekiel passionately declares his desire to indulge in all the world has to offer and to continue his pursuit of magic to unprecedented heights. He proclaims that he must live, even if it requires methods akin to the devil's own handiwork. Changing the subject, Ammon requests that Ezekiel not involve himself with Ophelia for the time being, as she is under investigation. Ezekiel scoffs but agrees, commenting that one can't be too careful, lest they face a worst-case scenario like Isabella did at her hands. Ammon notes that Ezekiel used Ophelia to describe a worst-case scenario. Ammon then poses a question: what would Ezekiel do if he were to come face-to-face with Cedric? Ezekiel laughs, dismissing the idea of meeting a dead man as a horrible joke. Ammon chuckles along, privately thinking that little does Ezekiel know, Cedric is most likely the one who killed Isabella. Ammon realizes Cedric has begun his revenge sooner than anticipated and that he must prepare a countermeasure. He decides against joining forces with the deranged Ezekiel. He knows an alliance is doomed, as Cedric would surely target the sacrificial herds. If Cedric has truly been reborn, Ammon decides his best move is to use Ezekiel as bait to divert his attention. While Ezekiel is occupied, Ammon plans to form a pact with the monster kind. He vows that Cedric will face death a second time by his hands. The scene shifts and a woman screams at Alfred, furious that he would make such outrageous demands of his own mother. The woman, Alfred's stepmother, berates him for arriving at their mansion without permission and demanding she forfeit the rights of succession to him. One of Alfred's companions thinks to himself that he expected this now that the deed is done and Isabella is gone. In a brief flashback, Alfred leaves Valnora's in Ophelia's care to keep the Empire away. When she asks his plan, he explains his next move. With his father having lost his seat as head of the family, he intends to take control of it. He will use its influence to clean up the pests infesting the Imperial court from the inside. His stepmother insists that his father Algrren has disowned him, and that his younger brother Henry will be the successor. Alfred counters that the disinheritance isn't official and that his father had been keen to make him successor. His stepmother flies into a rage, shocked that he would call his own father a fool. One of his companions notes that the woman bears no resemblance to Alfred. The companion realizes this woman must be Alfred's stepmother, as his birth mother is deceased. It is only natural that she wants her own son, Henry, to inherit the family. The stepmother declares that Alfred's disrespect means he lacks the right to succeed, and calls for Henry to demonstrate why. Henry steps forward and performs a ritual, a large magic circle rumbling as he summons a creature of fire and scales. His mother announces that Henry has passed the rite of succession, becoming the new contractor for the symbolic familiar of House Belial, the Greater Salamander. She explains that they conducted the ritual immediately after Algren's arrest to establish Henry as the rightful heir. Believing the pact with the Greater Salamander secures their position, she declares the reins of the family are now on their side. Alfred calmly states that while the familiar is tradition, it does not automatically grant full rights as head of the family. Alfred continues, revealing that the first head of the family commanded an even greater familiar, and the Greater Salamander only became the norm from the second head onward due to their magical impotence. Enraged, his stepmother snaps, calling him magically impotent. She calls him a failure who couldn't even contract a familiar, and claims that's why Algrren disowned him. With a snap of his fingers, Alfred coolly asks a question. He asks whoever said he couldn't contract a familiar of his own, as a massive summoning circle erupts with power. His stepmother can only stare in disbelief and terror, realizing it cannot be. From the light emerges a colossal, armored figure wreathed in flame. The stepmother recognizes the being with horror, stuttering its name, the supreme spirit Efreet. With the mighty Efreet at his side, Alfred looks down on his stunned family and asks if they have anything else to say or if he needs to show them more. He smirks, offering to indulge them, though he adds that it will not make any difference. Inside the Belial residence head office, Alfred's stepmother surveys the room, remarking on the horrible state of affairs. The butler Simon confirms that since Lord Algren's arrest, the government of their lands has been left dysfunctional. He explains that all political affairs have come to a complete halt. With a smirk, the stepmother challenges Alfred, doubting a mere student could process such administrative work. She tells him to suffer through the month's worth of untouched documents. Unfazed, Alfred declares that he cannot let his subjects suffer any longer. With a determined gesture, he magically draws the documents toward him. The papers swirl around Alfred as he stands calmly, absorbing the information from every page simultaneously. His stepmother can only stare in disbelief. He effortlessly processes the entire workload in an instant. In a flash, the documents are neatly organized, and Alfred announces that one pile is good to go. He notes another pile will require separate instructions, and he will need to see those responsible. He calmly asks if this is all the work that has accumulated. His stepmother is stunned, unable to comprehend how he managed it so quickly. Alfred explains that wielding magic requires calculating complex formations at high speed, making blitzing through documents child's play. Alfred then notes the beautiful handwriting on the documents and asks for an explanation. His stepmother's pride returns instantly. She boasts that they searched the country for writers with the most beautiful handwriting and hired them as secretaries. She proudly states they have 50 such secretaries on staff, a force unrivaled by other nobles. As she begins to call their work art, Alfred cuts her off, calling it a waste of hard-earned taxpayers' money. She is left completely speechless. He states firmly that artistic ability is completely unnecessary for office work. He instructs Simon to reassign the secretaries to other fields, accommodating their preferences as much as possible. Alfred declares that from now on, handwriting documents from scratch will be prohibited except in special cases. His stepmother protests, but he ignores her and asks Simon for a note slate. Simon provides one, asking if he needs chalk as well. With a confident grin, Alfred declines, saying it will be unnecessary as he prepares to use 4th-tier magic. Alfred unleashes an air drill spell. His stepmother wonders what in the world he is doing. Simon watches in disbelief, realizing Alfred is using powerful offensive magic to etch words onto the stone tablet at incredible speed. Finishing his work, Alfred remarks that it is good enough, now they just need to coat it with ink and press it on paper. He holds up the finished product, a generic report document made from the template. He explains that by carving a template into the slate, they can reduce clerical work to a minimum. He acknowledges the previous documents were beautiful and without mistakes. However, he points out that their creation wasted paper over single mistakes and was a significant waste of labor. Alfred states firmly that he cannot let such waste continue any longer. His stepmother argues that a document for a noble's eyes must have elegant handwriting. He roars that there is nothing elegant about her insistence, calling it pure egoism. He accuses her of letting noble pride lead her to force famous artists into meager clerical work which has no elegance. He continues that in doing so, she is squandering money gained through the blood and sweat of their citizens. Simon listens with a grim, moved expression. Alfred prepares to make his final declaration. With passion, Alfred proclaims that from now on, he will not allocate any budget to things that do not have a practical benefit. He declares that from this day forward, the well-being of their subjects will be placed first and foremost. His stepmother is aghast, wondering what nonsense he is spouting. Feeling suddenly unwell, she stumbles away. She excuses herself to retire for the day. As she walks away, she internally seethes, believing nobles have the right to bleed their subjects dry. She silently calls out for Lord Algrren. Convinced that Alfred has lost his mind, his stepmother resolves to do something about it. Back in the office, Alfred calls for Simon. He explains that he has other duties and needs to delegate his governing responsibilities. He then asks Simon to serve as the acting lord of his domain. The old butler is shocked by the proposal. Alfred says he wants to give the best to his subjects and believes Simon is capable of handling the responsibility. He asks if he is up for the task. Simon begins to protest. Alfred's intense gaze stops him. Alfred assures him he isn't forcing the position on him, but admits he can think of no one else more fit for the role. He asks once more if Simon will take it on. Moved, Simon accepts, vowing to devote every last bit of his strength to fulfill the role. With that settled, Alfred moves to the next topic, asking for a report on another affair. Simon's expression hardens as he asks if Alfred is referring to Ezekiel of the 3 holy sages. He confirms he has investigated the illegal noble banquet rumored to be held within Belial territory. Simon reports that the banquet is a gathering of shady characters, including slave traders, narcotics dealers, and merchants dealing in taboo materials. Attendees include distant relatives of House Belial, and Ezekiel himself is rumored to be among them. Simon explains they hold auctions for slaves and prohibited materials in this banquet of corruption. Hearing this, Alfred's mind is made up. Looking out the window with determination, Alfred declares his first act in clearing out the pests that infest the country will begin at that very banquet. Simon confirms the next banquet will be held in 1 month, on the next full moon. He reports that they have identified some of the lower-ranking participants and could strike now. Alfred dismisses the idea, stating that apprehending minor members would only alert the organizers and jeopardize their entire plan. Alfred's goal is to neutralize all the corrupt nobles at once, using the banquet as the ideal venue for a first strike. Simon expresses his concern, reminding Alfred that these are still great nobles, and incarcerating them will not be an easy task. With a confident smirk, Alfred assures him that it is indeed possible. With a month to prepare, Alfred believes they have plenty of time to make the needed moves. He thinks to himself that for a crackdown of this magnitude, they will definitely need the help of a certain man. He instructs the butler to summon Thylos and Lisa. Lisa and Thylos look around, confused about where they've been brought. Alfred explains that they have arrived at the Shadow Chasm, a place rumored to connect to the demon realm. Lisa recognizes the name, noting it's a famous dungeon that only S-rank adventurers are allowed to enter, while Thylos asks why they're there. Alfred casually mentions that as the owner of the domain, he can overrule any laws prohibiting their entry. He then declares his intention: he's going to have them enter the dungeon, much to Lisa's horror. Lisa erupts in protest, calling the plan reckless and insisting a regular academy student like her could never survive inside. Alfred calmly tells her there is nothing to fear. He reveals that he conquered this dungeon when he was only 9, but Lisa retorts that his crazy childhood doesn't make her feel any safer. Alfred nonchalantly adds that monsters spawn endlessly in the dungeon. He lists off a terrifying roster of monsters, which only frightens Lisa more. He smirks, mentioning that the Dark Lord can also put up a decent fight. Finally, he reveals their task: they are to enter the dungeon and survive for an entire month. The revelation sends Lisa into a panic, collapsing to the ground and wailing that she will definitely die. Alfred asks Thylos if he can use healing magic, and Thylos confirms he can. Alfred tells Lisa she'll be fine, but she yells back that healing magic is useless if she's already dead. Thylos recalls that Master Cedric transferred a piece of his soul to Lisa when he saved her, so her life is not truly in danger. He decides against telling her to maintain the tension of the training, and asks if she is ready to go. Dusting herself off, Lisa reluctantly agrees. She warns that she'll be furious if she doesn't get stronger after all this suffering. Thylos reassures her that it is a tried-and-true training method of Master Cedric's. Stealing her resolve, Lisa declares she's ready for whatever comes. Just then, Alfred casually mentions that he applied a special enchantment zone to the entire dungeon. Lisa and Thylos are both surprised, having not heard about this before. Alfred explains that the enchantment makes 1 month outside equal to an entire year inside the dungeon. The realization hits both Thylos and Lisa with immense shock. Lisa trembles as she asks if he really expects her to survive in there for a full year. As Alfred smiles mischievously, Lisa screams that she never signed up for this. 1 month later, the scene shifts to the Magic Academy. In an arena, Lisa stands opposite a young man named Richard. Richard addresses Alfred, asking if he should call him by his first name or by his new title, Lord Belial, to which Alfred replies he doesn't mind. The headmaster acknowledges that Alfred and Thylos are special enough to warrant early graduation. However, he questions Lisa's inclusion, feeling Alfred is overstepping his boundaries. Alfred asks the headmaster to reserve judgment until after he sees the results of the mock battle. The headmaster scoffs, reminding him that Lisa's opponent, Richard, is a prodigy who she has no hope of defeating. With a snap of his fingers, the headmaster declares the match to begin. Alfred watches intently, telling Lisa it's time to show him the fruits of her training. Richard charges forward, declaring he will end the fight in a single move. He unleashes a powerful 7th-tier magic spell, Extreme Fire, sending a massive wave of flame directly at Lisa. The spell explodes with tremendous force. Richard laughs, confident of his victory. The headmaster, however, stares in shock and disbelief at the aftermath of the attack. As the smoke clears, Lisa stands completely unharmed, leaving Richard to wonder how she survived. Lisa stretches casually, boasting that even Al acknowledged her talent for defensive magic. With a confident grin, she taunts Richard, telling him he'll need to conjure an attack on the level of a Kaiser Dragon's breath if he wants to hurt her. Richard stares in disbelief, utterly baffled that Lisa not only survived his attack but completely nullified it. As she stands calmly amidst the dust, he can only wonder what kind of power she possesses. In a flash, she circles behind him, her hand sweeping past his face with immense speed. With a powerful blow, Lisa sends Richard crashing to the ground, knocking him out instantly. Watching from the sidelines, Thylos smiles, remarking on her excellent work and how her opponent couldn't even keep up with her speed. Lisa turns to Alfred, eagerly asking for his assessment. He gives her a score of 70, pointing out that while her rear strike was effective, her opponent still noticed her movement. Lisa slumps in disappointment, wishing for a little praise, but Thylos reassures her that receiving a 70 from Alfred is high praise in itself. Turning to the headmaster, Alfred states that with the match concluded, they can all graduate together. The headmaster objects immediately. Alfred reminds him of his promise to approve Lisa's graduation if she won. Flustered, the headmaster argues that allowing a commoner to graduate early would cause an uproar among the great nobles. The headmaster insists Lisa must go through the proper testing procedures, but Alfred dismisses this as a waste of time. He proposes a different test: assemble all the senior students and have them face her at once. He declares with absolute certainty that even then, Lisa will win. Alfred continues, stating that no student at the academy could even scratch her. The headmaster is aghast at the ridiculous suggestion that she could defeat the entire senior year alone. Considering Alfred's recent accomplishments, he suspects it is not mere bravado and begrudgingly agrees when Alfred promises to handle any complaints. Internally, the headmaster concedes, reasoning that he cannot risk having the entire senior class hospitalized. As they walk away, Alfred reflects on the constant obsession with nobility, decrying the entire system as foolish. The scene shifts to the capital of the Facilia Empire. In the throne room, Emperor Aurelius Erudine VIII is attended by Theodore, the head of the Royal Knights of the Guard. The Emperor asks Theodore if he has heard about the unscrupulous banquet to be held in Belial's domain. Theodore, head of the Royal Knights of the Guard, confirms he has. The Emperor then poses a hypothetical question: what would happen if he ordered Theodore to apprehend every noble attending the event? Theodore explains that a large-scale raid would be difficult, but with a battalion of Imperial forces, it would be a success. However, he warns that such an action would undoubtedly lead to him being stripped of his position. Still, if the Emperor wishes it, he promises to arrest every noble they can catch. The Emperor rejects the idea, stating he cannot afford to lose Theodore, whose presence is the only thing holding back the court's corruption. He laments his own powerlessness, explaining that the Emperor is merely a figurehead, and if 7 or more members of the Imperial Council agree, they hold all the power. The Empire, he explains, is a congregation of 10 city-states ruled by the 10 lords, and his ancestor only became emperor due to holding the most territory. Feeling utterly pitiful, the Emperor expresses his immense debt to Theodore. Seizing the opportunity, Theodore mentions that the lowest seat of the 10 great lords, belonging to House Belial, has recently become vacant. The Emperor acknowledges this, impressed that Theodore managed to imprison Algrren. Theodore clarifies that House Belial was always a minor power, mockingly called seat fillers. With the mountains of incriminating evidence from Algren's illegal activities, the other lords had no choice but to let him fall. The Emperor muses that the family's time is short. Theodore then brings up the matter of the heir, Alfred, and the Emperor confirms he's heard of him. The Emperor dismisses Alfred as a young failure of a son. He believes Alfred can be easily manipulated, making House Belial easier to manage. As Theodore takes his leave, he excuses himself for an appointment. He privately scoffs at the Emperor's assessment, thinking that House Belial's time is far from over. Theodore is certain the Emperor's prediction will not come true. Arriving at the Royal Knights of the Guard's head office, he is greeted by a familiar voice. The deputy commander laughs, reminding Theodore to use his new title. Theodore apologizes, stating he is expecting a young boy's arrival shortly. He asks for privacy, but the deputy commander argues that despite his abilities, the boy is still just a student. The deputy commander offers to stay and mediate. Theodore firmly states it will be unnecessary. Seeing the look in his commander's eyes, the deputy commander relents. He leaves the room, closing the door behind him. Alone, Theodore whispers Alfred's name. He mentally recounts the recent events, young Skimlet's arrest and the deputy's transfer. And finally, Algren's arrest. He sees a common scriptwriter behind it all, a single elegant plan. The evidence gathered against House Skimlet was particularly refined, a hallmark of his exploits. Theodore connects these threads to the greatest secret Alfred shared only with his closest friends, that he had achieved the secret of rebirth. Just then, a knock comes at the door. Theodore tells the visitor to come in. Combining all these facts leads him to a single, undeniable conclusion. The door opens to reveal Alfred. Theodore tips his hat, a wide grin on his face, and greets him not as Alfred but with a different name entirely. "Welcome back, Sir Cedric." In the Divine Age, a great war raged between gods and demons. At the war's end, the defeated demons were shown mercy and given their own separate realm to live in, the underworld. The gods placed shackles on the demons, preventing them from manifesting in the human realm. However, when a human woman wandered into the underworld and fell in love with a king of hell, their union gave birth to a new race possessing both human and demon blood, the monster kind. Over time, the monster kind were treated as the lowest citizens of the underworld. Due to their weaker demonic traits, most held little more power than humans. Because of this weakness, they were permitted entry into the human realm. Though on rare occasions, some were born with powerful demonic abilities. These powerful few are known as the 100 Generals, the reason for the monster kind's superiority over humans. They are considered the monster kind's living weapons. In the monster capital of Evil Garden, the story of their origins is recounted. In Evil Garden, one of the 100 generals, Beelzebub, asks the holy sage if he understood the explanation. The sage introduces himself as Ammon. Finding that all the talking has worked up an appetite, Beelzebub decides it is time for a quick meal. A terrified man screams as a monstrous tiger appears before him. As his hand begins to decay, he tries to cry for help. Beelzebub explains that the 100 generals are monster kind who exhibit atavism, a reversion to their powerful ancestral traits. The man is instantly consumed. To maintain their existence in the world, they require a large amount of human sacrifices. These sacrifices are used as fuel for transdimensional summoning rituals, just as their demon ancestors required. Beelzebub angrily asks who would dare to steal their sacrifices. Ammon explains that the human who once plotted to overthrow them, Cedric, has likely been reincarnated. Beelzebub dismisses the threat of Cedric, more concerned with the one who has been stealing from them. Ammon identifies the deviant as Ezekiel, but insists that ignoring Cedric would be a mistake. Beelzebub laughs, questioning what a single human could possibly do against them. Beelzebub seems impressed by the effort a human would need to achieve rebirth. They announce a month-long trip to Ammon's country. Beelzebub offers to locate Cedric and teach him a lesson. Beelzebub plans to show Cedric that all his efforts are meaningless against those born with power. Ammon warns that Ezekiel is a wary man and that even Cedric would struggle to find him. Ammon privately schemes, realizing that Ezekiel's illegal auction banquet is the perfect place to lure both Cedric and Beelzebub. He gives himself a month to find Cedric, smirking as he declares his old foe is doomed to fall to his wits once again. Ammon asks Beelzebub to send him young, beautiful women as offerings. Beelzebub questions why appearance matters when only the soul is consumed. Ammon replies with a disturbing grin that it would simply be more fun to hear the death throes coming from ladies. Ammon confirms that Ezekiel will be at a masquerade. Beelzebub adds that the event will also host an illegal auction. The mention of masks reminds Ammon of something. He recalls an incident years ago when an anonymous, masked assailant assassinated 13 members of the 100 generals. Beelzebub admits that their kind is bloodthirsty and speculates it could have been a high-ranking general testing their strength, but notes the culprit was never found. Ammon adds that the only clue they have is that the perpetrator wore a mask. Meanwhile, Theodore explains to Cedric that the royal guard cannot raid the banquet without solid evidence. Cedric understands this means he must infiltrate the auction to assess the situation. Theodore agrees, stating they can only move in once they are sure their targets cannot escape. Theodore compliments Cedric's new suit. Cedric remarks that he must look the part for the banquet, but then remembers he forgot to bring a mask, which Theodore says is not an issue. Theodore produces a glowing mask. Cedric recognizes it with a smile. Theodore confirms it's a memento from the time they infiltrated the monsterkind's capital together. Theodore calls it the most unforgettable experience of his life. He recalls how Cedric, wearing that very mask, had shown him that it was possible for a human to triumph against the 100 generals again and again. Putting aside memories of his past life, Cedric announces it is time to head for the banquet, as Ezekiel, Beelzebub, and Ammon also prepare to converge at the same event. The host, Ezekiel, expresses his surprise and honor at the arrival of his esteemed guest. He identifies the newcomer as Lord Belial, one of the Empire's 10 great lords, accompanied by his companions Lisa and Thylos. Cedric confirms his understanding of the auction's entry requirement with Ezekiel. Ezekiel internally smirks, thinking this rule implicates everyone present in the illegal activities. He eagerly anticipates the unique item Cedric must have brought for the auction. Ezekiel begins to list various illicit possibilities, from rare slaves to magical narcotics. Cedric stops Ezekiel's speculation, clarifying he has not brought any items for auction. He reveals his knowledge of another event hosted there, a slaves' battle royale. To Ezekiel's surprise, Cedric announces he has brought participants for the deathmatch. Cedric announces to a shocked Lisa that she will be participating. While she protests, he calmly tells her that Thylos will be joining her as well. Ezekiel skeptically asks if he means for the 2 humans to be his participants. Ezekiel warns that 2 human slaves would be considered an insufficient entry for such a high-profile event. Cedric calmly acknowledges the host's concern. He then begins to cast a summoning spell to reveal his 3rd participant. The summoned warrior, Deathblaze, appears, and Ezekiel is stunned to see a member of the Dragon People tribe. Cedric asks if this entry is sufficient, and an excited Ezekiel agrees that tonight will be memorable. Deathblaze confirms that the Battle Royale's rules forbid weapons, and she wants to ensure that this includes dragon stones. Lisa worriedly asks Deathblaze if she will be okay. Deathblaze scoffs, boasting that in her human form she's still far stronger than her companions. Ezekiel comments on how surprising it is to see a dragon person offered up as a combatant. Ezekiel warns that powerful giants and beast people are already on the roster, implying Cedric's fighters are outmatched. Cedric calmly replies that Ezekiel is in for a surprise. He then makes it clear that he expects no complaints if his fighters slaughter the competition. While Ezekiel notes Cedric's confidence, Thylos warns that their opponents have been carefully chosen. Cedric cuts the conversation short, eager to begin and let the results speak for themselves. Reluctantly, Ezekiel agrees to proceed. He calls for his servant to take custody of Cedric's fighters. The servant, Laius, violently yanks Lisa by the arm. Cedric sternly rebukes the action, demanding his companions be treated with respect. Ezekiel offers a dismissive apology, explaining that his servant is also their guard. Ezekiel is privately enraged, refusing to be ordered around by someone he considers a mere brat. He doubles down, ordering his servant to take Lisa away. Ezekiel decides to teach Cedric a lesson about who is in charge, telling his guard to ignore the order for respect. The guard grins menacingly and acknowledges his boss's command. He lunges forward to grab Lisa. Just as the guard reaches for Lisa, Cedric steps in and stops him, catching his wrist. Cedric coldly reminds the guard of his master's apology. The guard panics, wondering about the source of Cedric's strength. He realizes with horror that he cannot break free, no matter how much force he uses. Cedric tightens his grip, crushing the bones in the guard's arm. The guard lets out a blood-curdling scream. He falls to the ground in agony, clutching his shattered arm. Cedric looks down at the fallen man and calmly states that the guard lacks discipline. Ezekiel is in disbelief, recalling that Laius was an S-rank adventurer. He stares in terror, unable to comprehend how Cedric could possess such overwhelming strength. Cedric turns to Lisa and asks if she was hurt. She quickly assures him that she is fine. He smiles, expressing his relief. Lisa is surprised and touched by his concern. With the confrontation over, Cedric announces that it is time to begin. Putting on a mask, he rallies his companions, ready to enter the battle royale. Whispers of decadence fill the air at the masquerade ball, with guests reminiscing about the emerald dragon fetus from the last auction and fantasizing about tonight's rare goods. Two guests discuss their past purchases, one lamenting how the 7 color-eyed elf she bought broke too easily and resolving to find a more durable slave this time. Observing the crowd, Cedric cynically reflects on the attendees' corrupt desires, noting that a potent poison would be useful for killing but would never be used against the powerful figures gathered here. Cedric can barely stand the meaningless ramblings of the corrupt scoundrels filling his ears. On a balcony, 2 women debate the event's legality, acknowledging that even with the Emperor's diminished power, the banquet is still illegal. One notes that the local lord holds independent authority, but from his vantage point, Cedric knows this will not be a problem. Cedric asserts that since he, as Lord Belial, is the local lord in attendance, he has the authority to arrest everyone here. Still, he admits to himself that his main objective is not these minor criminals. His true target is a hooded figure across the way. Cedric thinks to himself that he is here for this specific person. He knows that if he misses this prime opportunity, tracking his elusive target again would be incredibly difficult. The hooded man, unaware of his hunter's true identity, vows that Ezekiel will not escape him this night. He is certain that tonight, at this very banquet, his target's life will be his. Meanwhile, in a private chamber, an aide offers his humble apologies to a respected general. The aide apologizes profusely for bringing his general to such a repulsive event, to which the general replies that he certainly hopes he is. The general complains about how uncomfortable the masquerade makes him, as the masks remind him of a traumatic incident involving the fearsome masked warrior. His discomfort boils over as he declares his intention to massacre every human in attendance. His aide is shocked by the outburst. The aide stammers that while the guests may be fools, they are all influential figures in high society. The aide frantically begs his general to reconsider his intent to rain judgment upon the guests. The general laughs, claiming he was just joking and knows how to keep himself in check. Though his aide internally notes that the bloodlust felt very real, the general continues, calling the nobles excellent, prompting his aide to ask what he means. The general calls them pigs who attend illegal banquets and engage in corruption, caring nothing for the empire as long as they thrive. He calls them excellent subjects for this very reason. The aide agrees, adding that these humans funnel taxed funds to enrich themselves, thus destroying their own society from within. The general smirks, remarking that from a monster's perspective, they couldn't ask for more perfect subjects to exploit. The aide, now understanding, bows and praises his general's discerning eye. The general then changes the subject, mentioning he heard about a battle royale planned for the evening, one that includes beautiful women and children. He coldly orders his aide to ensure he can hear their beautiful screams so he won't get any more upset. Elsewhere, the auction master is informed by his attendant that it is almost time for the battle royale to begin. The attendant adds that they have received a special order from a very important VIP in attendance. The master stirs, asking who he is referring to. The attendant admits he doesn't know the VIP's identity. The individual is so important that even their name is kept secret. The master wonders if it could be someone from the Imperial family, acknowledging that this complicates matters before asking for the orders. The command was to ensure that tonight's battle royale becomes a host to the melodious screams of many beautiful sacrifices. The master is relieved, seeing no issue with the request. He notes that Algrren's successor, Cedric, has already brought prime specimens for the show. Guests murmur in anticipation as they announce that the slaves' mad banquet has begun. The battle begins in an underground coliseum. A guest predicts that the sacrificial lambs will be the first to fall. Another noble agrees they will be torn apart for their pleasure, while one of the participants dismisses tonight's lambs as loser material. The nobles eagerly anticipate the main event, a true battle royale to the death between the slaves after they are done with the lambs. One of the nobles turns to two of the participants, a girl with buns and a man with an eye patch, to confirm they understand the plan. The man with the eye patch confirms that their master ordered them to be considerate of their opponents in the battle royale. His companion agrees, confident that they can hold back and still win without endangering themselves. Nearby, Deathblaze scoffs at the repeated instruction, muttering that it would be more difficult for her not to be considerate. Her companion praises her reliability, calling her master Deathblaze. Her eye twitches as a new opponent enters the arena. A massive figure lands with a thunderous crash, shaking the ground. An onlooker gasps in recognition at the giant's stature. The man is identified as the infamous serial killer, Maya Ricardel, who has mutilated 100 young girls with his bare hands. Maya turns his attention to one of the young female participants, offering a mock apology. He tells her that if she wants to curse someone, she should curse herself for being born so beautiful. He roars with glee, declaring himself a simple man who loves little girls like her. As he lunges, Deathblaze calmly steps forward and lightly taps him on the head. In an instant, Maya Ricardel's entire upper body explodes in a shower of gore, shocking her companions. Beaming, her face splattered with blood, Deathblaze turns to her stunned allies and proudly explains that she killed him gently, without making him suffer. The girl with the buns screams in terror, realizing this is not what their master meant by being considerate. In a private viewing room, the organizer of the masquerade stares in absolute horror. Inside a decorative glass container rests the freshly severed head of the Ricardelian monster, the very beast meant to entertain the guests. The sheer impossibility of the situation leaves the nobles speechless. The organizer collapses in his seat, completely overwhelmed by the gruesome surprise. Meanwhile, General Beelzebub reclines on a luxurious sofa, expressing his sheer displeasure at the lackluster event. Beelzebub coldly wonders if the host wishes for an early death. He is completely unaware of the panic currently gripping the organizer, who frantically demands answers for the disaster. Sweating profusely, the organizer realizes the gravity of the situation. With a highly important anonymous noble in attendance, failure is not an option. He nervously notes that the new lord's earlier bravado was not a bluff. Desperately, he orders his subordinates to deliver a message to the event's host immediately to salvage the night. Down in the arena, the announcer addresses the bewildered crowd, declaring a sudden revision to the bout's rules. Acknowledging the gruesome and instantaneous death of their star monster at the hands of the young girl, he announces a new format. The match will now be a team battle royale. It will pit the three formidable slaves against an alliance of every other fighter in the deathmatch. As the announcer signals the recommencement of the bloodshed, Beelzebub's aide realizes the true nature of the spectacle. Beelzebub smirks, explaining that simply tormenting the weak would be a bore. He notes that the organizers intend to use sheer numbers to torture the unexpectedly strong slaves, ensuring the promised entertainment is delivered. The general's mood shifts instantly to delight, praising the organizer for understanding how to truly entertain their guests. In the main hall, Cedric's companion notes the selfish rule change. Cedric dismisses it as a non-issue. Down in the underground coliseum, the horde of muscular slaves charges at the trio. Cedric confidently states that no matter how many opponents group up, they stand absolutely no chance of stopping Deathblaze and her companions. The three slaves effortlessly tear through the opposition with terrifying precision. Watching the absolute massacre, the organizer trembles in fear, wondering if the trio are actual fiends. He notes in horror that two of the participants are merely incapacitating their foes, yet they are still overwhelmingly dominating the entire arena. With a final thud, the last of the allied slaves falls. The trio stands victorious amidst a pile of unconscious and broken bodies. Suddenly, a violent crackle of energy fills the air, catching the terrified attention of Beelzebub's aide. The sharp sound of a lethal strike echoes as his master acts without warning. Trying to maintain order, the announcer profusely apologizes to the respected guests for the unexpected turn of events. Brushing past the massacre, he eagerly redirects their attention to the main event. He officially commences the long-awaited auctions. The announcer nervously assures the crowd that such minor hiccups are normal, hoping the future acts will be better managed. Watching from the shadows, Cedric notes that everything is proceeding exactly according to plan. He decides he simply needs to pick the perfect moment to strike. Meanwhile, the gruesome result of Beelzebub's sudden strike is revealed as the organizer's severed head rolls across the floor. Back in the VIP room, Beelzebub's aide bows deeply, apologizing for the deep irritation the event has caused. Licking the fresh blood of the organizer from his hand, Beelzebub admits his annoyance has peaked to the point of wanting to massacre every human present. The aide rationalizes that such absolute mood-driven freedom is exactly what defines the 100 generals. However, Beelzebub quickly changes his mind, noting that the earlier bloodbath was an amusing irregularity. Smiling wickedly, the general confirms his aide's earlier suspicion. He states that Cedric has finally taken the bait. The auction proceeds rapidly, with the announcer declaring the sale of a young girl from the Heavenly Wings tribe for a staggering sum. Beelzebub rejoices, having finally completed his collection of 100 exotic maidens. He gleefully anticipates extending his lifespan by bathing in their blood, noting that he will use his remaining funds to purchase more slaves purely for amusement. The bidding war intensifies as rare items like a primordial mandrake and cursed potions are sold for exorbitant amounts. The crowd cheers wildly at the staggering wealth being thrown around. Amidst the frenzy, the hooded man Cedric had been observing vows to win the next bid. Deciding the time for observation is over, Cedric steps forward. He enters the VIP room, directly confronting General Beelzebub. The general feigns ignorance, casually asking the new lord of House Belial what business he has with him. Unfazed, Cedric begins to formally recite Chapter 142 of the Imperial Law. Cedric details Article 49, which strictly prohibits the enslavement or sale of individuals from the Heavenly Wings tribe to prevent international conflict. Beelzebub smirks, openly admitting his awareness of the law but arrogantly questioning what it has to do with him. Cedric coldly states that violators are sentenced to life in confinement. Drawing his blade, he adds that the sentence is preceded by a public display to deter the masses. In a flash of blinding speed, Cedric swings his heavy sword, cleanly severing Beelzebub's right arm. The general stares blankly at his stump, a confused gasp escaping his lips before the pain even registers. Cedric finishes his recitation, declaring the public amputation of the violator's right hand as the mandated punishment. As a fountain of blood erupts from his severed limb, Beelzebub finally unleashes a blood-curdling scream of pure agony. Beelzebub screams in agony as blood sprays from his severed stump. The surrounding nobles watch in absolute horror, demanding to know the meaning of this sudden violence. Unfazed by the chaos, Cedric coldly orders the general to remain still. He continues his recitation of Imperial law, citing the severe penalties for purchasing forbidden potions, entirely ignoring Beelzebub's desperate pleas for mercy. Cedric details the mandated punishment for the offense, which dictates 100 strikes with a blunt instrument. Without hesitation, he winds up and delivers a devastating punch directly to the general's face. The sheer force of the blow sends Beelzebub crashing into the wall, leaving him slumped and broken. Cedric casually remarks that he is exercising clemency by only delivering a single strike, though he muses that 100 regular blows might have actually been more merciful. The room falls into a stunned silence. The silence shatters as the attendees erupt into a blind panic. Recognizing that the new lord is indiscriminately handing out arrests, the corrupt nobles scramble to flee the banquet hall. The desperate guests slam against the heavy double doors, only to find them completely unyielding. Approaching from behind, Cedric calmly informs the trapped crowd that he took the liberty of magically locking the exits beforehand. With his piercing gaze, Cedric declares that every single person in the room is under arrest, without exception. The nobles furiously protest the tyranny, arguing that he only has the jurisdiction to arrest those caught in the act of a crime. The wealthy patrons insist that his charges are unfounded, pointing out that many of them haven't even placed a winning bid tonight. They accuse Cedric of breaking his own laws by detaining innocent bystanders. Cedric casually dismisses their complaints, confident that they have all purchased illicit goods at previous underground events. The nobles demand he open the doors immediately, clinging to the fact that he lacks the formal authority to imprison them without hard evidence. Chuckling at their desperate legal defense, Cedric admits that he is not a member of the Royal Knights. However, he reveals that he was officially requested to cooperate in their investigation, granting him full authority to detain the attendees. The crowd refuses to believe that a public government agency would coordinate such a raid, accusing Cedric of bluffing. Unbothered, Cedric explains that he only needs to keep them contained until the actual authorities storm the building. Right on cue, a stern voice echoes through a communication device, confirming that the Royal Knights will arrive in 3 minutes. Hearing the voice of Commander Theodore, the nobles begin to sweat, their denial crumbling as Cedric reveals he has also secured the event's ledger. Tossing the damning record book onto a table, Cedric mocks the organizers for leaving such critical evidence at the scene of their crimes. He offers to let anyone whose name is absent from the ledger leave, though his wicked smile makes it clear he knows none of them are innocent. Realizing they are completely cornered, the ringleaders drop their sophisticated facades. One of the masked nobles frantically announces that they have a hidden passage prepared for exactly this kind of predicament. The desperate noble urges the crowd to stall for time while he activates a communication orb. He plans to summon the powerful guards stationed underground, intending to use them as a meat shield to secure their escape. As the orb connects, the noble is utterly bewildered by the image projected from the lower levels. Instead of his loyal guards, the crystal displays a very confused young girl staring back at him. Peering into the orb, Al cheerfully reports to Cedric that she and her companions have successfully neutralized all the underground guards, just as he instructed. With their final escape route severed and their muscle completely wiped out, the corrupt nobles clutch their heads and unleash screams of absolute, hopeless despair. Exactly 3 minutes later, the heavy doors are violently breached as Commander Theodore and his men storm the banquet hall. Cedric smiles, pleased by the punctual arrival of the Royal Knights. Cedric praises the commander for his elegant dependability. Stepping into the hall, Theodore smirks and notes that the young lord hasn't changed in the slightest. Theodore commends Cedric as the Royal Knights secure the banquet hall and take the suspects into custody. The room is quickly brought under control as the knights organize the arrested nobles. Cedric accepts the praise, watching the corrupted attendees being rounded up. Cedric wonders if the older man found his methods lacking, but Theodore clarifies that the sheer volume of arrests simply highlights the deep-rooted corruption in their world. The commander jokes that they might run out of prison space at this rate. Cedric smirks, confident that the facilities can handle the influx. Theodore chuckles in agreement. Cedric reaffirms his relentless intent to send every last criminal to prison. He vows to continue until the Imperial court is entirely purged of its vile corruption. Theodore sighs, recognizing the young lord's unwavering, almost intimidating resolve. Meanwhile, Cedric quietly slips away from the scene. Noticing Cedric's sudden absence, Theodore asks a nearby young knight if he has seen the young lord. Theodore looks around the empty hall. The flustered knight nervously denies seeing anyone. He quickly excuses himself and hurries off to search for the missing noble. Watching the boy run off, Theodore marvels at how uninhibited Cedric has become. Deep in the forest outside the estate, a cloaked figure darts through the trees at breakneck speed. He moves with a swiftness that belies his ancient appearance. His guards struggle to keep pace with his incredible physical enhancement magic. The lead guard marvels at his master's speed, acknowledging it as fitting for the great Lord Ezekiel. The guard questions the wisdom of fleeing before securing their prized auction item. Ezekiel scoffs, warning the boy not to underestimate him. He reveals that he already collected the goods during the commotion. Ezekiel gloats that while his enemies might have set an ambush at the banquet, he had already planned his escape. He points toward an isolated church in the woods, revealing that he prepared a secret route inside. His guards praise his impeccable foresight and wisdom. Ezekiel details his plan to use the church's hidden passage to reach the town and blend into the crowd. The isolated church looms ahead in the clearing. Ezekiel notes they will need to maintain their pace for another half hour. However, his lead guard begins to heavily pant, struggling to catch his breath. The guard confesses that despite their combat training, they lack the stamina to keep up with the master's relentless speed. The exhausted guard politely asks if Ezekiel could lower his speed just a fraction. Insulted, Ezekiel glares back, refusing to compromise their escape. Instead, the Dark Magus offers to bestow some of his own strength upon the faltering warrior. He casts a spell directly onto the panting man. Suddenly, the guard feels a massive surge of dark power welling up from within him. The surge of power quickly turns into agonizing pain as the guard screams in horror. He realizes his body is being forcibly converted into a rampaging undead. Ezekiel casually confirms the use of 9th-tier vampire creation magic. The Dark Magus smirks, stating that since the guards failed their duty in life, they will now serve him perfectly in death. The guard curses Ezekiel's cruelty as his mind slips away. His eyes roll back as the dark transformation completes. The newly formed vampires slump forward, devoid of their humanity. Ezekiel orders them to kneel, chuckling at his own ruthless efficiency and his new mindless escorts. Reaching the church doors, Ezekiel complains that the raid was poorly executed, suspecting Theodore's involvement. He finds it strange that there are no signs of any pursuers or an ambush. Just as he notes the lack of an ambush, the heavy doors creak open. To his surprise, the young blonde knight from the banquet hall stumbles out. The young knight feigns panic, claiming he wandered too far while looking for someone. He acts completely bewildered by the dark forest surroundings. Unfazed by the boy's apparent innocence, Ezekiel immediately orders his newly created vampires to attack. The young knight gasps as the monsters lunge toward him. Ezekiel mocks the boy's misfortune for running into a master magus. The knight calmly inspects a small dish nearby, noting it contains salt. The knight merely clenches his fist, preparing a spell. Unimpressed, Ezekiel laughs at the idea that ordinary holy salt could possibly threaten his undead. Ezekiel boasts that his creations are high-level vampires, completely immune to such trivial tricks. Ignoring the villain's arrogance, the knight softly chants an enchantment. He infuses the salt with potent magic, turning it into an undead slayer. The monstrous vampires leap through the air, closing in for the kill. With a swift motion, the knight throws the enchanted sacred salt directly into the faces of the lunging vampires, causing them to erupt into agonizing shrieks. The vampires are instantly incinerated by holy flames, crumbling into ash before they can even reach their target. The knight lowers his hand, completely unfazed by the display of power. Ezekiel stammers in absolute shock, staring at the remains of his guards. Ezekiel screams in disbelief, demanding to know the true identity of the boy. He cannot comprehend how a lowly knight could possess the power to purify his high-tier vampires. Sighing, the knight remarks that it is finally time to drop the act. As his form shimmers, Ezekiel realizes with horror that the boy's appearance was nothing more than an illusion. The illusion fades away, revealing Cedric standing in the knight's place, his signature mask back on his face. With a dark, predatory smile, Cedric greets Ezekiel, ready to relish their long-awaited reunion. Cedric warmly welcomes the Dark Magus to their long-awaited reunion. Still reeling from the effortless destruction of his undead creations, Ezekiel realizes the young man possesses an incredibly refined mana pool, allowing him to turn ordinary salt into a lethal holy weapon. Refusing to be intimidated, the old magus immediately retaliates by unleashing a devastating 9th-tier spell. Massive, thorny vines erupt from the ground, surging forward to crush the young lord in a deadly embrace. The Dark Magus launches his overwhelming assault, confident that it will end the battle before it even begins. Ezekiel smirks as the thorny vines close in on his target. However, Cedric casually shatters the massive vines with a flick of his wrist, commending the old man for not underestimating him based on his youthful appearance. Ezekiel screams in absolute disbelief, unable to comprehend how anyone could break out of a 9th-tier spell so easily. Cedric playfully notes that the old man must have discerned his true identity during the brief moment their magic clashed. As dread sets in, Ezekiel recalls a past warning about coming face to face with the legendary commander. Trembling under the weight of the realization, the Dark Magus knows he could never mistake that overwhelming presence for anyone else. With a theatrical bow, Cedric confirms his identity as the former commander-in-chief of the Magic Guild, rendering formal introductions unnecessary. Cedric casually admits that had he not recently reclaimed his hidden magical reserves, he might have struggled against such a high-tier spell. Hearing this, Ezekiel is paralyzed by despair, knowing that fighting back is completely pointless. He realizes that begging for mercy would be equally futile against someone of Cedric's caliber. The title of the great sage echoes in Ezekiel's mind as he collapses to his knees. Cedric looks down at the defeated Magus, noting that a calculating man like him has surely already run the scenarios. The young lord coldly states that all resistance and pleas for mercy are entirely meaningless. With chilling calmness, Cedric advises the old man to end his own life right then and there if he wishes to die as painlessly as possible. Ezekiel shudders, knowing perfectly well that if he attempts any meaningless resistance, the ruthless commander will subject him to the agonizing flames of purgatory before finally putting him out of his misery. Just as Ezekiel accepts his grim fate, the heavy church doors creak open, interrupting the execution. Two new figures step into the hall, prompting Cedric to remark that a moth drawn to a flame is the most apt analogy for the situation. Ezekiel's eyes widen in sheer terror as he recognizes the uninvited guests. The Dark Magus stammers the name of his former ally Ammon, who stands beside a far more terrifying presence. Ezekiel identifies the short, blonde individual as General Beelzebub, a true monster among monsters and one of the most powerful beings in the demon realm. Ammon greets Cedric, amused to see the commander's reincarnated form. General Beelzebub casually confirms the identities of the two men before him. He notes that they have stumbled upon both a deviant rebelling against monster kind and a lowly criminal who dared to steal their livestock. With a cheerful clap of his hands, the general happily sentences both Cedric and Ezekiel to the death penalty. Ezekiel panics, assuming Ammon betrayed him to the 100 generals. Cedric merely smiles, finding the sudden arrival of such high-ranking enemies to be a rather pleasant surprise. Ezekiel quickly calculates a new plan, hoping that Cedric will mount enough resistance against the general to create an opening for his own escape. However, Cedric completely shatters that hope by casually informing the old Magus that his execution will be temporarily postponed. Ezekiel is left stunned as Cedric turns his full attention to the intruders. Annoyed by Cedric's attire, Beelzebub politely asks him to remove his mask, mentioning that it brings back irritating memories. The general recounts an old tale of a masked human who wandered the monster realm, challenging members of the 100 generals to duels and leaving a trail of dead bodies in his wake. Cedric smirks, noting that he is quite familiar with that particular story. Cedric playfully asks how the general knows so much about the incident. Beelzebub explains the mechanics of the vestments of the Nether, an exclusive aura that drastically reduces the force of any approaching attack. He notes that the legendary masked man somehow possessed a method to completely neutralize this absolute defense. Beelzebub notes that the specifics of the aura are highly classified, making it impossible for a mere human to bypass it. While rumors suggested the perpetrator was a battle-frenzied monster general, evidence left at the crime scenes pointed to a much more terrifying possibility. The general concludes that the massacre of the elite monsters was indeed perpetrated by a human. Cedric casually remarks that the 100 generals place far too much faith in their absolute defense. With a swift motion, he flicks a small rock directly at Beelzebub. The tiny projectile smacks squarely against Beelzebub's forehead, leaving the general in utter disbelief. He realizes his impenetrable aura completely failed to activate against such a simple attack. Cedric explains that by layering a multifaceted negation field over the object, any physical or magical attack can bypass the absolute defense and make direct contact. Putting the pieces together, Beelzebub stares in sheer terror as he realizes Cedric is the legendary masked assailant who slaughtered over 10 members of the 100 generals. Cedric merely flashes a sinister, knowing smile in response. Watching the invincible general fall completely silent, Ammon begins to panic. He had planned to use the 100 generals to massacre his enemies, never anticipating that Cedric could pierce through their ultimate defense. As Ammon internally spirals over his impending doom, Cedric suddenly calls out to him, noticing his sudden quietness. Adjusting his mask with a chillingly calm demeanor, Cedric tells his former ally that there is no need to be so nervous, suggesting they finally have a little chat about the day Ammon ended his previous life. Cedric formally invites his former comrade to discuss the circumstances surrounding his assassination. Ammon, trembling and sweating profusely, stammers that they had been completely ignorant of Cedric's hidden capabilities back then. The panicked traitor demands to know why the commander kept his ability to bypass the monster's absolute defense a secret. He argues that knowing about such a crucial weakness would have changed everything. Unfazed by the outburst, Cedric calmly agrees to explain his reasoning. Cedric details how the monster's impenetrable auras gave them a false sense of superiority, leading them to view humans as mere prey rather than actual threats. He then poses a hypothetical question, asking Ammon what would happen if a human suddenly proved capable of killing one of their elite generals on the battlefield. Cedric explains that such a shocking defeat would shatter the monster's arrogance, throwing their entire chain of command into absolute chaos. He points out that the silent, terrified demon standing beside them is currently experiencing that exact same panic. Ammon desperately reiterates that if the commander had just shared this tactical advantage, the tragedy of his assassination could have been avoided. Cedric acknowledges this truth, preparing to reveal the dark motive behind his silence. The young lord confesses that he always viewed the three holy sages as the true obstacle to humanity's victory. He realized that merely stripping the monsters of their defensive advantage wouldn't be enough to win the war. Because the demons possessed overwhelming magical talent, Cedric knew humanity needed to exploit their psychological weaknesses. However, he feared that sharing his trump card with the sages would result in the information leaking to the enemy, prompting him to test their loyalty instead. Cedric reveals that he deliberately left himself vulnerable to assassination as a final trial for his comrades. If they had simply stayed true to humanity, he would have trusted them with his secret. But they ultimately chose to murder him. Realizing that fighting alongside traitors would inevitably doom humanity, Cedric decided that allowing his own death was the most strategic move. By reincarnating, he could restart his campaign without repeating the mistake of trusting them. Ammon is left horrified, realizing their successful coup was entirely orchestrated by their victim. The former sage angrily protests, calling the commander's convoluted plan absurd given the widespread political opposition to the war. Cedric calmly admits that his actions were driven by a foolish sense of naivety. Despite knowing the corruption within the Empire's nobility, Cedric desperately wanted to believe in the inherent goodness of his fellow leaders. He had hoped the three holy sages would ultimately prioritize humanity's survival over their own greed. Cedric expresses his profound disgust at how the sages willingly sacrificed thousands of innocent citizens to the monsters just to maintain their own safety. He admits he was foolish to think they possessed any redeeming qualities. The commander explains that his method for piercing the absolute defense was humanity's only real chance at victory. His death at the hands of the sages definitively proved they were too corrupt to handle such critical information. As Cedric expresses genuine regret over the grim reality of their situation, Ammon internally pieces the puzzle together. The traitor realizes that the sages' comfortable, privileged positions were entirely dependent on the ongoing threat of the monsters. The horrific truth dawns on Ammon: the sages never wanted to defeat the demons, as ending the war would strip them of their power. Cornered by the reincarnated commander, Ammon briefly despairs, before a sudden realization sparks a new, sinister hope. A wicked smirk spreads across Ammon's face as he mocks Cedric's lingering naivety. He deduces that while the young lord has reclaimed some strength, he is nowhere near the overwhelming power of his past life, making him vulnerable to a combined assault. Emboldened by this theory, Ammon declares that Cedric cannot possibly defeat both a former sage and an elite demon general simultaneously. His fear completely evaporates, replaced by an arrogant certainty that they can finish the assassination they started years ago. Amused by the accusation of naivety, Cedric decides to demonstrate the results of his self-reflection. Without a moment's hesitation, he utilizes ultimate-tier magic to instantaneously close the distance between them. Before the traitor can even react, Cedric unleashes a devastating point-blank magical strike. A blinding beam of energy tears through Ammon, leaving him screaming in absolute agony as the commander promises to crush him without mercy. As Ammon reels from the lethal blow, Cedric casually mentions that he used to hunt demon generals for sport back when he possessed only half of his prime strength. He coldly assures the dying traitor that his current abilities are more than sufficient to eradicate them both. the severed demon general steps in front of Ammon, declaring his intent to stall the reincarnated commander. Ammon, clutching his bleeding shoulder, clarifies that he has no intention of letting the monster escape, confusing the general. The demon clarifies with a wicked grin that he is securing the time needed to guarantee their victory. Recognizing the formation of a desperate scheme, Cedric confidently invites them to try their best, promising to crush whatever strategy they muster. Taking the lead, the former sage immediately unleashes a barrage of 9th-tier elemental magic, summoning earth, ice, fire, and thunder simultaneously. Cedric effortlessly dodges the volley, mildly impressed that the traitor can cast 4 high-level spells concurrently. The demon general sneers, asking if the commander wants more as a flurry of magical blades descends upon him. Forced to deploy an absolute defensive barrier, Cedric compliments Ammon on his vastly improved casting speed. Meanwhile, the traitor frantically checks if his monstrous ally has finished preparing his own attack. Ammon notes that General Beelzebub possesses an extraordinarily massive pool of mana. Cedric observes that the monster's reliance on innate strength makes their magical construction sluggish. He realizes that if given enough time, the demon can unleash truly devastating power. Unfazed by the looming threat, Cedric wonders if this combined assault is the extent of their plan. Ammon counters that his own rapid casting abilities allow him to construct formations concurrently. However, the traitor knows he risks destroying his own mind if he pushes past his strict time limit. Pushing his limits, Ammon unleashes a massive barrage to briefly suppress Cedric. The exhausted traitor declares that his part in the scheme is complete. With the necessary time secured, the battered demon general gleefully steps forward to deliver the final blow. Beelzebub unleashes his ultimate-tier magic, a colossal sphere of destructive energy known as Eternal Flare. Ammon marvels at the overwhelming magical power, certain of their victory. Cedric sighs, admitting he only played along to see what pitiful strategy they had devised. Disappointed that they failed to exceed his expectations, Cedric casually snaps his fingers to disable his concealment spell. Ammon watches in sheer terror as the commander manifests an even larger, more terrifying version of Eternal Flare right above them. Cedric praises Ammon's improved speed, but coldly demonstrates the true meaning of concurrent spellcasting. The traitor is left paralyzed by the realization that Cedric conjured an ultimate-tier spell while effortlessly fending off his rapid-fire attacks. Declaring the battle over, Cedric unleashes his massive orb of destruction. The demon general screams in disbelief and defiance as the overwhelming magic descends upon him. A blinding explosion completely obliterates the demon general, shaking the very foundations of the church. Meanwhile, the heavily injured Ammon uses the chaotic distraction to flee into the damp, crumbling underground tunnels beneath the battlefield. Stumbling through the flooded sewers, the terrified traitor gasps for breath. He is completely shaken by the unfathomable depths of Cedric's reclaimed power. 5 minutes into his escape, Ammon realizes he isn't being pursued. He deduces that Cedric was forced to prioritize silencing the demon general to protect his rebellion plans. The former sage gloats, confident that not even the commander could kill both of them so quickly. Cackling at his own cunning, Ammon plans to blend into the city masses and retreat to a hidden safe house. He reaches the end of the tunnel, eager to push through the final door to his guaranteed survival. However, as Ammon steps out, his triumphant grin vanishes when he is greeted by a group of unknown figures calmly awaiting his arrival. Ezekiel emerges from the tunnel, his eyes widening in horror as he recognizes the great vampire Ailia and Deathblaze waiting for him. Standing before the formidable duo is a young man he does not recognize, though the reality of his trapped situation quickly sets in. The old traitor frantically calculates his odds, knowing that fighting them head-on is a guaranteed death sentence. He glances around for an escape route, but the rhythmic tapping of Cedric's footsteps shatters his hopes. As the young commander steps into view, Ezekiel realizes that running is mathematically impossible. Cedric approaches the trembling old man, expressing mild disappointment that Ezekiel hasn't even engaged Aphelia's group yet. The young commander notes that the passage of time has made the former sage pitifully slow. Realizing the overwhelming gap in their speed and power, Ezekiel drops to his knees in complete defeat. He reasons that since Cedric is a genuine military man, a brave concession might be his only path to survival, prompting the commander to coldly remark on his sudden obedience. Ezekiel banks on Cedric's merciful nature, recalling how the commander spared Ailia long ago after her surrender. The old man vows not to resist, internally rationalizing that as long as he abandons his pride, he will live to see another day. While Ezekiel secretly plots his inevitable revenge, Cedric stares down at the kneeling traitor. The commander acknowledges Ezekiel's desperate fixation on survival and condemns the heretical methods he used to prolong his own life. Cedric agrees to spare Ezekiel's life in deference to his surrender, choosing a different form of punishment. Hearing this, the old man sinisterly rejoices, confident that his deceptive plan is working flawlessly. Completely unaware of the true horror Cedric has in store for him. In his twisted mind, Ezekiel envisions tearing Cedric apart, planning to use the commander's heart as an ingredient for a wonder drug that will grant him even more longevity. Suddenly, a dimensional gateway hums to life behind him, summoned by a snap of Cedric's fingers. The heavy doors of the gateway creak open, revealing a stunning woman with long flowing hair who greets Cedric with a sinister smile, leaving Ezekiel utterly confused. Cedric casually welcomes the demon king Mephistopheles, who prefers to be called Thylos. Ezekiel is paralyzed with shock, recognizing her as the close aide of Astaroth, a demon king obsessed with the pursuit of knowledge, as Cedric asks her what sort of offering she expects. Cedric offers the terrified Ezekiel as a gift, presenting the old man as a high-quality lump of mana, perfectly suited for Astaroth's crazed experiments. Thylos steps closer, her sharp eyes gleaming, as she confirms the immense magical energy resting within the trembling bag of flesh. The demon king claps her hands in delight, calculating that with their healing magic and life-prolonging rituals, they can harvest Ezekiel's mana for at least 1,000 years. Cedric feigns concern, politely requesting that they refrain from conducting overly extreme experiments on his offering. Thylos chuckles at the unreasonable request, reminding Cedric that Lord Astaroth will do whatever is necessary in the pursuit of magic. She assures him, however, that the sheer volume of mana Ezekiel provides will at least spare the other lesser test subjects in their castle from meaningless cruelty. Ezekiel stammers in utter disbelief, demanding an explanation for this betrayal. Cedric coldly points out that given the old man's history of heretical experiments, he should easily deduce his impending fate. The commander details how the most efficient way to extract mana is by slowly slicing off a victim's limbs and collecting the energy released from their agonizing screams. Cedric continues his grim explanation, noting that once the limbs are entirely shredded, healing magic will regrow them so the torturous cycle can repeat endlessly. Realizing the true nature of his spared life, Ezekiel frantically reminds Cedric of his promise not to kill him. While Thylos steps in to mockingly comfort their new guest. Thylos flashes a sadistic smile, promising to personally ensure that Ezekiel is kept right on the absolute brink of death without ever crossing it. She gleefully details how they will force-feed him the most nutritious meals and life-prolonging elixirs to guarantee his eternal suffering. The old traitor weeps in despair, begging to know why he is being subjected to such a cruel fate after willingly surrendering. Cedric stares down at him with absolute apathy, reminding Ezekiel that he had already offered him a chance to take his own life painlessly. With chilling finality, Cedric declares that by refusing that initial mercy, Ezekiel had already forfeited his right to choose his own end. Thylos effortlessly scoops up the thrashing, terrified old man, amused by his energetic resistance as she prepares to depart for the demon castle. Before stepping through the gateway, she smoothly offers Cedric a proposition for future collaborative research. Cedric sighs and flatly declines, having absolutely no interest in participating in Astaroth's sick experiments. The demon king merely chuckles at his rejection, playfully calling him a buzzkill, as she carries the screaming traitor into the dark void. Ezekiel's agonizing screams echo from the abyssal gateway as the heavy doors slam shut, sealing his horrific fate for eternity while Cedric watches in cold silence. Following their decisive victory, Cedric and his allies gather around a large dining table to celebrate their success. The energetic Deathblaze excitedly boasts about her contributions to the battle, proudly recalling how she effortlessly tore through the approaching slave fighters. Thylos playfully points out that her victims actually exploded, but the Dragon Girl brushes off the technicality, insisting she ripped them apart and cast them aside. Unbothered by the details, Deathblaze declares that all that matters is their complete and utter victory. Eager for recognition, she leans towards Cedric and eagerly requests that he inform her master, Abaddon, of her incredible strength and valuable contributions. Cedric calmly agrees to pass along the praise whenever he gets the chance, sending the girl into a fit of joyous cheering. As Deathblaze dances on her chair in triumph, Lisa watches with a sweat drop, noting that the girl is acting completely intoxicated despite her youth. Watching the spectacle, Thylos brings up a lingering question, wondering how a demon like Deathblaze can remain in the human world without the need for constant sacrifices. Thylos deduces that her unique ability stems from her true nature as a dragon person, making her technically a demi-human. He explains that the strict realm-crossing rules only restrict demonkind from staying in the human realm, while humanoid races face no such barriers. Ailia chimes in, noting that even with her demi-human status, earning the rank of a divine general under a king of hell is an extraordinary feat. Deathblaze smugly agrees with Ailia, boasting that her immense power cannot be described with simple words. Lisa nervously chuckles at the girl's pushy attitude before pointing out an even greater anomaly. She questions how Cedric's master, Alphonse, a mere human, was recognized as an equal to the King of Hell. Deathblaze excitedly concludes that Alphonse's status simply proves that Cedric is overwhelmingly powerful by extension. As Cedric quietly sips his drink, Thylos marvels at the realization that they might actually see a day where humanity escapes the monster's rule, realizing that Alphonse had planned for this exact future all along. Breaking his silence, Cedric turns his attention to Thylos, commending the young man for his excellent performance during the battle. Deeply moved, Thylos humbly accepts the praise. Theodore bows respectfully, expressing his gratitude on behalf of himself and Ailia for the opportunity to serve. The older gentleman then extends his thanks to the unseen ally standing guard outside, noting his appreciation for the man who refuses to even enter the room. Cedric smiles, acknowledging the hidden guard's crucial role as well. Looking toward the doorway, Cedric formally thanks Simon, who bows silently from the hall. Watching Cedric praise everyone else, Lisa sits quietly, feeling a twinge of disappointment as she assumes the commander has no words for her. She rationalizes that her recent growth was entirely thanks to Alphonse's help anyway. Just as Lisa resigns herself to being overlooked, Cedric turns his gaze directly to her. He warmly acknowledges her tremendous growth, expressing his deep gratitude for her assistance and assuring her that her newfound strength is the undeniable result of her own hard work. Caught completely off guard, Lisa's face flushes bright red as her heart pounds in her chest. Overwhelmed with embarrassment and joy, she stammers out a timid thanks, internally scolding herself for doubting him just moments prior. However, Cedric's warm smile quickly twists into a dark, calculating grin as he reveals the true reason behind his praise. He casually informs Lisa that her increased strength simply means he can work her to the bone like a workhorse. As Lisa and Thylos stare in stunned silence, Cedric reminds the entire table that the Empire is still crawling with corrupt fools and monsters. He declares that everyone present has a mountain of grueling work ahead of them until the day humanity finally prevails. Shifting the conversation to strategic matters, Thylos questions the wisdom of letting the demon Ammon escape during the chaos, even if it was necessary to capture Ezekiel. Cedric's eyes narrow with calculated intent as he assures his subordinate that Ammon's escape was not an oversight. He reveals that letting the demon flee was a deliberate part of his plan. Meanwhile, at the Magic Guild headquarters, a frantic Ammon bursts into the acting commander-in-chief's room. Panting heavily and clutching his chest, the demon leans against the heavy doors. He is completely overwhelmed by the sheer terror of what he had just witnessed. Slamming his fist against the wall in a panic, Ammon realizes the catastrophic implications of General Beelzebub being slaughtered by Cedric. He frantically wonders how he could possibly report such a disastrous truth to the rest of monsterkind without painting a massive target on his own back. The reality of his situation crashes down on him, since he was the one who summoned Beelzebub and led the general straight to Cedric. The other demons would undoubtedly accuse him of orchestrating the assassination. Smashing the wall in frustration, Ammon realizes he is trapped in a deadly bind between Cedric's overwhelming power and the wrath of his own kind. Driven to the brink of madness by fear and desperation, the demon screams into the empty room, agonizing over how he can possibly explain the catastrophic loss to the monstrous hierarchy without forfeiting his own life. Back at the celebration, Cedric accurately predicts Ammon's exact dilemma, explaining that the cowardly demon will inevitably fabricate an excuse about Beelzebub disappearing on a whim. Thylos immediately grasps the strategy, noting that Ammon's self-preservation guarantees he will cover up the truth of the general's demise. Cedric agrees, pointing out that they must use this bought time to cleanse the Empire of its internal corruption before the inevitable war begins. Cedric elaborates that if they were to make too much noise, rumors of their true strength would eventually reach the demons, leading them to investigate the general's disappearance. Since revealing the truth is a death sentence for Ammon, Cedric is confident the demon will spin an elaborate web of lies to protect himself, inadvertently shielding Cedric's forces from scrutiny. With a chillingly confident smirk, Cedric declares that they will exploit Ammon's exceptional talent for weaving excuses to conceal their presence. This forced deception will buy them the crucial time they need to prepare, ensuring they remain hidden in the shadows until they are fully ready to lead the final fight against monster kind. At the Magic Guild headquarters, the Imperial Chancellor, Duke Robert Cavendish, addresses the council regarding the unprecedented mass arrests at the recent banquet. He notes with feigned concern that the resulting chaos has made it nearly impossible to maintain order within the Imperial court. The young emperor challenges the Chancellor, pointing out that Alfred of House Belial should be praised for leading the arrests and improving Imperial order. Despite the temporary administrative disarray, unfazed, Cavendish counters with a sinister smile, arguing that the imprisoned nobles were vital to the empire's development and were only arrested for enslaving exotic tribes. He claims the council's consensus is that Alfred's poor judgment warrants a severe scolding rather than praise. The emperor realizes the trap as Cavendish reveals their true intent: to reward Alfred by appointing him governor of Brim Cross, the empire's most desolate and crime-ridden rubbish heap. Cavendish merely chuckles, mockingly calling it a just reward for someone who caused such a massive string of arrests. The emperor understands the malicious nature of the assignment, noting that Brim Cross is a lawless region where the only income stems from criminal bribery, money that quietly lines the pockets of corrupt nobles. The Chancellor smugly suggests that a few years in the harsh, troubled land will be the perfect political studying material for an ignorant young lord. The emperor silently seethes, knowing that any opposition he voices will simply be overruled by the corrupt council's majority vote. Cavendish openly gloats about the emperor's isolation within the council. The young ruler glares at the Chancellor, realizing the man has completely abandoned any pretense of respect and is blatantly ridiculing him as a powerless puppet. Unable to stomach the mockery any longer, the emperor abruptly excuses himself, stating he feels unwell. As he leaves the room, he bitterly remarks that there is no need for a mere decoration to remain at the table. With the emperor gone, the remaining council members ask Cavendish for his true intentions. The Chancellor reveals his plan to offer Alfred a generous gift of women and funds, hoping to entice the young lord into becoming a compliant puppet at the bottom of the 10 great lords hierarchy. When asked what will happen if Alfred refuses the bribe, Cavendish's smile turns deadly. He casually notes that Brim Cross is rife with crime, making it incredibly easy to arrange an unfortunate accident to make the young lord disappear permanently. Meanwhile, at the Imperial border, Alfred and his companions arrive at the frontier town of Brim Cross. Lisa looks around in dismay at the rampant poverty, shocked by the sorry state of the town's inhabitants. As they walk through the largest slum in the Facilia Empire, Lisa complains about a strange, pungent odor covering the entire area. Sniffing the air, Alfred quickly identifies the distinct scent of cannabis. Thylos corrects him, explaining that the smell belongs to a much stronger narcotic called midnight dust, crafted from a base of belladonna and mandrakes. Alfred notes that the drug has likely been cut with inferior materials to maximize profit, making it even more destructive to the users' bodies. Theodore confirms that the widespread sale of illegal drugs has completely laid waste to Brim Cross. Alfred then turns to the older man, double-checking if the former head of the Royal Knights is truly fine with accompanying him. Theodore calmly replies that, just as Alfred predicted, his knights were stripped of their authority following the banquet arrests. Laughing off his lost title, Theodore admits he has no desire to spend his days writing mundane reports in an office. He eagerly declares his preference to share in Alfred's dangerous work, prompting the young lord to assign him his first official mission. Alfred instructs Theodore to use his local law enforcement connections to assemble all of the town's illegal peddlers, as well as the general populace. In the central square, with a sharp, calculating gaze, Alfred reveals his plan to use his newfound authority as the local lord to arrest the merchants on the spot. Theodore warns that such a public display will antagonize not only the local criminal syndicates, but also the powerful figures profiting off them. Theodore presses further, asking if Alfred understands that this aggressive move is an outright declaration of war against the 10 great lords. When Alfred challenges him, asking if he opposes the idea, the old knight simply tips his hat with a grin. Far from opposing it, Theodore enthusiastically declares that he has long waited for the day they could finally bring true change to the corrupt empire. Pleased with his allies' resolve, Alfred signals the start of their operation. Stepping forward with a confident smirk, Alfred announces that it is time to make his elegant debut to the townspeople as the new lord of Brim Cross. In the slums of Brim Cross, a desperate addict begs a local dealer for his next fix. The smug merchant flatly refuses, reminding the frantic man that his merchandise requires coin, which the addict clearly lacks. The dealer cruelly points out that the addict's failing health makes his internal organs far more valuable than his life. He offers to purchase the man's lungs, kidneys, liver, and heart for a generous price, mockingly framing it as a rational transaction. Pushing the desperate man further, the merchant suggests a month's worth of narcotics in exchange for living out his final days in their harvesting center. Drowning in withdrawal, the addict screams in agony as the dealer taunts him with a fresh packet of drugs. Driven mad by his craving, the addict lunges at the merchant in a violent frenzy. Unfazed, the dealer smoothly draws a knife, mocking the man's lack of common sense as he prepares to strike down his assailant. Before the blade can connect, Theodore suddenly intervenes, violently slamming the dealer's face into the wooden table. The addict watches in shock as the older man effortlessly subdues the armed criminal. Tipping his fedora, Theodore formally introduces himself as the former head of the Royal Knights, announcing that the rest of the illicit merchants have already been secured. The dealer is left bewildered and terrified, wondering why an official crackdown is happening when his syndicate supposedly had a protected deal with the great lords. Theodore looks down at the pinned criminal with a mocking smile, reminding him that selling illegal narcotics is strictly against the law. He dryly notes that enforcing such basic rules should be nothing more than common sense. Meanwhile, in the central square, a massive crowd of townspeople and arrested merchants has been assembled. Alfred steps forward, confidently introducing himself to the murmuring populace as the new governor of Brim Cross. Alfred declares his intention to process all lawbreakers with absolute strictness. The crowd erupts into nervous whispers, realizing that the new lord is immediately busting the local syndicates instead of accepting the usual bribes from the corrupt nobility. Scanning the crowd, Alfred's gaze lands on a young boy clutching a woven basket. Feigning a sudden pang of hunger, the governor approaches the child and asks to take one of his appetizing apples. The boy recoils in panic, pleading that he starved himself for an entire day just to afford the fruit for his sick sister. Unmoved by the tragic story, Alfred cruelly snatches an apple from the basket, claiming the child's desperation is all the more reason to take it. As the boy bursts into tears, the onlookers whisper in disgust, assuming Alfred is just another arrogant noble making a cruel show of his authority. Ignoring their judgment, Alfred turns and calls out to his knight. To the crowd's surprise, Alfred orders Theodore to immediately purchase a large crate of apples and a full month's worth of provisions for the child. Kneeling before the bewildered boy, the governor gently returns the stolen fruit and offers a sincere apology for his actions. Alfred explains that despite his apology and offer of compensation, the fact remains that he just committed theft. He solemnly declares to the town that the law is absolute, noting that the standard penalty for minor theft is imprisonment, while harsher cases demand the amputation of the criminal's arm. Without a moment's hesitation, Alfred uses a surge of magic to cleanly sever his own left arm, declaring that as the governor, he is bound by the very laws he enforces and will always keep his promises to his subjects. The severed limb drops to the cobblestones with a sickening thud, sending a wave of absolute horror through the crowd. Theodore quickly covers the young boy's eyes, while the onlookers stare in disbelief at a ruler who would willingly maim himself without a single flinch of pain. Maintaining his cool expression, Alfred casually picks up his severed arm and casts a powerful healing spell, seamlessly fusing the flesh back together. He internally admits that using his own body for such a theatrical display was a bit of a farce, but acknowledges its tremendous effectiveness. The townspeople watch the miraculous recovery in stunned silence, overwhelmed by a chaotic mixture of worry, fear, and profound awe. Despite their varying emotions, the entire populace comes to a single, terrifying realization about their new governor. They understand that Alfred is a man of absolute conviction, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that if he declares a judgment, he will see it through to the bitter end, no matter the cost. At the House Balliol main estate, the former lady of the house lounges in sheer decadence with two muscular lovers. Despite her luxurious surroundings, she complains bitterly about her restricted access to the family's wealth ever since Alfred took over as the new head. Her dark-haired paramour playfully laments the suffering he endures to keep her satisfied, though he notes the distinct advantage of her husband's absence. The madam agrees, relieved they no longer have to sneak around. However, she expresses deep frustration that she can now only rely on the taxes from her own personal territory rather than the vast family coffers. She coldly remarks that there is a strict limit to how much more she can squeeze from her peasants, admitting she wouldn't care if a few starved to death. Her lover points out that a massive die-off would cause logistical headaches for the following year. The madam reflects on how Algren's imprisonment freed her socially. Grinding her teeth in irritation, she curses how his absence has completely crippled her financial freedom. Attempting to soothe her foul mood, the dark-haired lover pulls her close, teasing her for being so distant and formal. Just as they begin to embrace, the bedroom doors are violently thrown open by Simon, the family's head butler, who shouts for the madam in sheer panic. Startled from her lover's arms, the madam stammers as she realizes something is terribly wrong. Outside in the courtyard, a chaotic scene unfolds as an energetic blonde girl blows a whistle. She enthusiastically orders a crew of workers to drag every single valuable item out of the estate. Rushing down the stairs in a panic, the madam demands to know what is happening. The energetic girl cheerfully announces that all the pointlessly expensive items in the mansion are being liquidated for cash. The madam shrieks at her servants to throw the intruders out, completely bewildered by the sudden repossession of her treasures. Simon calmly steps forward, informing the furious woman that the liquidation crew has full authorization. Holding up a sealed envelope, the butler reveals that a direct order has just arrived from Master Alfred himself. Reading the letter in absolute horror, the madam discovers that Alfred is seizing the entirety of the Belial family's amassed wealth to solve the starvation crisis in Brim Cross. As the workers carry away her luxurious furniture, the letter brutally clarifies that she will only be left with the bare minimum required for her administrative duties. The blonde girl happily points out a treasured 200-year-old painting gifted by the emperor, noting it will fund the orphanages. She then eyes a massive gold bar meant for next year's banquets, gleefully calculating its massive resale value. Even a slab of premium dragon meat, intended for dinner, is slated for sale, leaving the madam to watch her life of luxury evaporate. Trembling with rage, the madam curses Alfred for going to such extremes. Simon bows politely, advising her to exercise severe restraint in her personal spending from now on. She reluctantly agrees to surrender the main family funds, believing her private wealth is safe. The madam fiercely declares that she owns a separate, private territory outside of House Belial's control, demanding they leave her personal business alone. Simon closes his eyes and calmly shatters her illusion. He informs her that legally, that territory was only entrusted to her through an informal oral agreement by the previous master. The realization hits her like a physical blow as Simon explains that her private villas and gems are still technically under the main house's jurisdiction. He coldly adds that all of her personal possessions have already been seized as collateral to pay off the massive debts she accrued while lavishing money on her lovers. Desperate, she begs to know how she will afford her lovers and her planned jewelry purchases. Unmoved, Simon states that out of respect for her noble status, Alfred will provide a bare minimum financial stipend. He firmly denies any allowance for her decadent lifestyle or expensive pearls. Grasping at straws, the madam asks if she can at least maintain her daily tea time with premium leaves. Simon counters that while tea time is a standard noble pastime, she will no longer be permitted to purchase outrageously expensive first-flush leaves when standard blends will suffice. Driven to the brink of madness by the total loss of her luxurious life, she screams at the butler, asking what the point of living is without her wealth. She furiously questions if a lowly servant truly intends to defy her. Simon stands his ground, reminding her that he acts as the direct representative of Master Alfred. Reaffirming that this absolute financial ruin is Alfred's unyielding will, Simon gives a final, polite bow and advises her to manage her meager spending carefully. The madam collapses to the floor in utter despair. She shrieks at the top of her lungs as the liquidation crew gleefully strips her estate bare. Meanwhile, at House Belial's secondary residence in Brim Cross, Alfred sits quietly on a sofa. He is enthusiastically greeted by Milford Chains, the local commerce chief, who praises the new governor's recent actions. Milford applauds Alfred for orchestrating such a grand arrest on his very first day. Alfred dryly dismisses the compliment and demands the man state his business. Dropping a heavy bag of gold coins onto the table, the commerce chief offers it as a token of sincerity alongside his official greetings. Alfred flatly rejects the bribe, reiterating his demand for the man's true purpose. Dropping his cheerful facade, Milford asks if Alfred has consulted the other 10 great lords regarding his aggressive crackdown on the local illegal markets. He confirms that the town's criminal underworld is backed by powerful nobles behind the scenes. Milford questions if the new governor truly intends to continue his cleansing operation, knowing he is stepping on the toes of the great lords. Unfazed, Alfred confirms his intentions, making it clear he has no desire to ally himself with a corrupt pawn. A sinister smile spreads across Milford's face as he acknowledges Alfred's valor. He delivers a thinly veiled threat, warning the young governor that not all nights are safe. He advises Alfred to be extremely cautious about his immediate surroundings from now on. The commerce chief smugly advises the young governor to be cautious, hinting that the night streets have grown dangerous. He gleefully anticipates that a little violence will easily topple a noble lordling. Observing the older man's lack of fear, the young governor realizes his earlier warnings completely missed their mark. The chief then marks a supposed hidden presence in the room, asking if that is their best attempt at concealment. The air ripples as a muscular man drops his camouflage, revealing himself behind the sofa. The chief proudly introduces his bodyguard, a violent specialist whose constant vigor honestly troubles him, boasting that even a foolish noble should now understand his perilous position. Unfazed, the young governor questions the chief's misplaced confidence. The governor flatly asks if they truly believe that level of strength is sufficient for a bodyguard. Insulted, the muscular man furiously steps forward, refusing to let the slight slide. Calmly remaining in his seat, the governor states that the bodyguard lacks the necessary muscle, suggesting he might only put up a decent fight against some of his companions. Provoked, the bodyguard slams his hands onto the glass table, challenging the young man to back up his words with actual strength. Meanwhile, the governor quietly contemplates that breaking an arm would be the simplest solution. The chief enthusiastically orders his bodyguard to finish the boy off. With a vicious grin, the muscular man begins a countdown to smash the governor's frail bones to pieces. Before the countdown even finishes, the governor effortlessly slams the bodyguard into the glass table, shattering it completely and leaving the older men staring in absolute disbelief. Standing up and adjusting his jacket, the governor plainly states that any form of intimidation against him is entirely pointless. Later, the bodyguard groans in pain while nursing his broken arm at a bar. The furious chief curses the young governor as a snot-nosed brat, but his injured companion advises him to calm down, reminding him of the boy's unprecedented academy scores. Acknowledging rumors that the young man single-handedly wiped out a group of assassins, the chief admits that explains his lack of fear. However, a sinister grin spreads across his face as he reveals a plan to plunge the governor into despair. He intends to use the boy's own earlier words against him. Recalling the governor's claim that his companions were merely decent fighters, the chief deduces that targeting the young girls in his entourage is the perfect weakness to exploit. Meanwhile, the two girls in question stroll cheerfully through the moonlit streets. The blonde companion complains about the governor working them to the bone. She excitedly notes that selling off the main mansion's luxurious items will greatly benefit the orphanage's construction. Suddenly, a group of masked assassins drops from the rooftops, surrounding them in the alleyway. The lead assassin smirks, mocking the foolishness of sending a girl and a child into the dark streets of Brim Cross. He confidently identifies them as the governor's companions, while the girls feign shock. The assassin boasts about his master's superior intelligence in exploiting an opponent's weakness. The assassin politely asks the girls to accompany them. Back at the bar, the chief notes that it is about time his men report their success in securing the hostages. He promises his injured bodyguard that they will have their fun soon. A communication crystal on the bar suddenly buzzes, prompting the bodyguard to praise his boss's foresight. However, instead of a successful report, a series of brutal thuds and agonizing screams echo from the device. The chief is left utterly bewildered by the sounds of his men being decimated. In the alleyway, the supposedly weak companions ruthlessly dispatch the assassins with monstrous strength, completely defying the intelligence the criminals had received. As the screams of the defeated assassins continue to pour from the crystal, the chief panics in sheer confusion. The young governor suddenly speaks up from behind him, declaring that as the mastermind behind an attempted abduction of minors, the chief will be treated as the principal offender. Invoking his authority, the governor places the corrupt official under immediate arrest. The chief whips around in horror to find the young man standing right there. Desperate, the chief demands to know how his plans leaked. The young man coldly reveals that he had been feeding them false information from the very beginning. Realizing that the governor's earlier claims of having weak companions were a complete lie, the chief's face contorts in absolute terror. Having successfully baited the chief into committing a severe crime, the governor announces he now has the proper legal justification to interrogate him and root out the entire criminal organization within the town.